A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said, "Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a watchtower. Then he leased it to tenants and went to another country. When the harvest time had come, he sent his slaves to the tenants to collect his produce. But the tenants seized his slaves and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again he sent other slaves, more than the first, and they treated them in the same way. Finally he sent his son to them, saying, 'They will respect my son.' But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and get his inheritance.' So they seized him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. Now, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants?" They said to him, "He will put those wretches to a miserable death and lease the vineyard to other tenants who will give him the produce at the harvest time." Jesus said to them, "Have you never read the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is amazing in our eyes." Growing up, one of the more popular things to check out at the library was a choose-your-own-adventure book. And if you don't know, choose-your-own-adventure books allowed you, as the reader, to make critical decisions for your main character throughout the story, and your decisions decided the fate of the hero. This is my children's book, Prisoner of the Ant People, and I've been playing it today, and much like when I was in school, I can't quite seem to get to the good, happy ending. No matter what I always did growing up, I always wound up with a tragedy at the end. So like today, it says, "They swarm over me, and when the sun finally rises, your bones glisten in the warm golden rays." It's pretty gruesome, pretty scary. Kind of like our parable today, which is a pretty gruesome parable. It's a parable of evil and injustice and murder and mayhem. And like a choose-your-own-adventure story, Jesus invites his listeners to come up with the ending. In fact, I think this is the only time Jesus allows a parable to have a choose-your-own-adventure style setting. Imagine Jesus telling us this story today and inviting us to come up with our own ending. The setting is really not so different. A nation or a city or vineyard on the precipice of violence and conflict, a fraught situation in which everything is being called into question, vast injustice and evil, an upsetting event that sends us into fits of anger, maybe even rage. What does your ending to this story sound like? The religious leaders have condemnation thick in their minds when they answer, "Well, he'll put those wretches to a miserable death." If we're really honest, our ending to this story might sound a lot like the religious leaders. Maybe we, like them, expect evil to be met with some kind of punishment. Maybe it's not too much to say that we even need evil to be met with punishment, that in their minds and maybe in ours, that is justice, an eye for an eye and all that. In fact, the notion of retributive justice, I think, is a backbone of American society. We only have to look at the scores upon scores of people we incarcerate in this country. We imprison a vastly greater percentage of our population than other similar countries, and our prison system operates on a profoundly more punitive axis. But even small injustices can stoke the fires of vengeance to roaring flames. You get cut off on the way to work and you have to fight the urge to retaliate in some small way, even if it's to speed up and just glare at them with as much self-righteous indignation as you can muster. Maybe you're wronged in some way and you secretly imagine all the small ways you might even the balance of things. Nothing reveals the unexpected, murky corners of our own hearts so much as when we ponder how to respond to the very real evil and the very real sin in the world when it's done to us or to others. And then to go a step further and imagine not being able to have that right anymore, pretty soon you get some angry folks. Hell hath no fury like humans denied their right to vengeance and retribution. Which makes Jesus' response to the religious leaders and their ending that they came up with so fascinating. because it seems to contradict the expectation of, or the right to punishment. Haven't you read the scriptures? He asks. And then he goes on to quote a portion of a psalm, Psalm 118, whose very refrain is repeated 4 times in 29 verses. It says, "The steadfast love of the Lord endures forever." In fact, the first 4 verses use this as a constant refrain. The steadfast love of the Lord endures forever, over and over again. It makes me wonder if that's the cornerstone he's accusing them of rejecting. The cornerstone of God's very nature, of God's steadfast and merciful love that never, ever fails, even when we fail, maybe especially when we do. Let us not forget that when the Son, Jesus, is murdered by the Roman authorities just a few days after telling this story, his response in real life couldn't be more different than the one imagined by the religious leaders. Jesus doesn't call down fire and lightning, vengeance or wrath, punishment or retribution, justified though it would have been. Instead, he says in an eternally binding proclamation that rings throughout creation from all times, even to today, even to you and me: Father, forgive them,